Hey, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today we're talking about something that I didn't think I ever wanted to see and was wonderfully surprised and have not been able to stop thinking about it because I am a Star Wars fan. I look like one, I know. And that show is Andor. And with me today is New York City filmmaker Sujewa Ekanayake and
Woo!
Brooklyn-based novelist Amanda Haynes. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on. I'll start with you, Sajiwa. Can you give me a quick synopsis of Andor and what your thoughts are on it?
Sure. Glad to be on the show. But before we get to Andor, I released the teaser trailer for 53 spaceships. Did you check it out?
Yes, I did. I sent you my thoughts on it last night.
Oh, that's
We
right. Yeah.
chatted a bit of it.
I
Yeah,
just,
we chatted a bit
this
about it.
alarm is set. Okay. We have an alarm going off. Do you pick it up?
I'm sorry?
There's an alarm going off. Do you get? Is it picking? Is it being picked up on the show?
I don't hear any alarms.
Okay. Then
Unless it's
we'll,
like that classic Star Wars alarm.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So we'll continue. Yeah. So yeah, I had a good time making the 53 spaceships trailer. It's out on YouTube now. People can Google it, and that's a sci-fi comedy that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So yeah, so far I'm getting good responses to it.
That's
So on to the Disney Star Wars Andor show. Yeah. So the story takes place. Let me go shut off that alarm. Amanda, you can jump in and talk about Andor.
Well, yeah, I could actually surmise it briefly just to begin. But yes, Andor is a show that it begins, and I'm gonna throw up the spoiler banners right now because it's hard to talk about a piece of media without having seen it. But it doesn't begin like a Star Wars show. It starts with this really grimy looking sort of street shot, and Cassian Andor walks into this bar. There are these two cops who are harassing
Not a
him.
bar, it's a brothel.
Yeah, a brothel bar. Yeah, tomato, tomato. But he is looking for his sister, and he ends up getting harassed by these two cops, and he ends up killing one of them in the middle of a scuffle. And then while the other one's begging for his life, he kills him, goes on the run, and now we immediately know, oh, this isn't like your usual Star Wars. But going from there, Sajiwa, can you give us the kind of a little bit of what happens after that?
So I think we should talk about the overall thing, which is if people saw Rogue One, this is sort of a prequel to Rogue One. Andor,
Mhm.
the show, follows over a number of years, maybe 5 years, 4 years, 6 years, maybe, um, how Cassian Andor, uh, the rebel, joined the rebellion and then got the mission to go, the mission that we see in Rogue One. So that's the show. I mean, a lot of people have seen it. So in season one, we see, um, his initial how he initially joins the early version of the rebellion, and in season two, we get sort of snapshots of the rebellion as it develops every year over, I think, the course of 4 or 5 years, maybe 4 years.
Yeah, the first season's like a few months, and then the second season kind of takes place over the course of like 4 years or something
Mhm.
like that, and it like connects straight into Rogue One at the very end. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
It's the whole thing is the story of how he goes from being just a marginal criminal, just marginal member of society, to joining the rebellion and
Mhm.
becoming a warrior with principles. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, the most interesting thing about this show is that it's not your typical Star Wars.
Mhm.
It's not about good guys versus bad guys. It's about moral gray areas. And the interesting thing about Andor is that he's this character who, when you first see him, he kills someone basically in cold blood,
Mhm.
which is sort of what he does in Rogue One when he's on the Ring of Safri and he's meeting an informant who gives him the information about Galen Erso and the design of the Death Star. And the Imperials pretty much corner him. He kills two stormtroopers because he knows they're going to take him and get the information from him. So instead, and the guy only has one arm, and the only way out of there is to climb up the wall. So he shoots him, and you kind of go, "Whoa, that's not a very rebel thing to do." And
Mhm.
this show really explains more of that, more than Rogue One, which I like. I like moments of it, but mostly it's just Star Wars porn. It's just
It's dark Star Wars.
yeah, well, it's just constant reference after reference after reference instead of really developing like an interesting story because the characters are expendable. And of course, spoilers, they all die in the end. So, and that kind of explains it. Where here, you're actually getting an intricate spy thriller
Mhm.
that is about the lives of people and the struggles that they have to deal with when forming a rebellion. It really shows what a revolution is really about and what it's really like. Like one plot point that I thought was kind of dull, but then when I actually saw behind scenes stuff and realized I was too stupid to realize it, is in season 2 when Andor crashes the experimental TIE fighter
Mhm.
on a planet and there's a bunch of gorillas fighting each other. That's early Yavin, a few years before it becomes the rebel base that we all know, and we see how these guys are basically clamoring over each other, not trusting each other, killing each other, and those sort of themes bleed on to or are really represented through Stellan Skarsgård's character Luthen Rail and how he's a morally ambiguous person, and even how Cyril Karn is a morally ambiguous person where well he stands for the because from his point of view, I'll get into Cyril in a bit, but you actually can see through his point of view how he feels the rebellion is bad and how he's bought into the propaganda that the empire has created over the years. But this show is really kind of reflective on human history. It treats Star Wars like it's a historical document almost, and in a very grounded, realistic way. How do you think the show reflects human history, and how does it make the show special in that way?
Well, you know, I thought the same thing you thought when I saw Andor compared to, the classic Star Wars movies that I
Mhm.
remember. That those classic Star Wars movies are the fantasy of what it's like to fight a rebellion, and
Mhm.
Andor is much more the reality of what it's like to fight a rebellion.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because Andor is it takes all your member berries and throws them away. And they'll give you like little bits of it. They'll give you little bits of nostalgia, but really what it's about, it isn't just about how horrible it is about how horrible the empire is, but it's about these people and how their lives get caught up in it. And it does show you what really forming a rebellion is like, because Luthen Rail is not a trustworthy person. He's a backstabber. He's a manipulator. Like when he recruits Cassian Andor, at first he's going, "Oh, you want to fight for us because you hate these bastards too, and we'll take them down together." And then immediately after the Aldani heist, when there was that one guy who basically wanted to take all the money and run, and then Andor killed him, and then he's on the run, and he didn't get enough information on the guy to see if he's trustworthy, to see if he won't rat or not. He ends up putting out the hit on him. And just like most revolutions that happen throughout history, yeah, there is a leader. They do uh, build up this thing, but a lot of times things don't end well for those revolutionary leaders. They don't end well for Luthen in this show, and throughout history, they don't end well for them. Like either they face the guillotine, or they end up um, just sort of not making the impact they want to. But it's very complicated, and I really do enjoy how I feel like Luthen is more of an interesting character than anyone else on the show.
Oh,
And
speaking of Luthen, I just want to say
yeah,
one thing. I had not seen those Dune movies before
yeah,
I saw Andor, and then I saw the first Dune movie, and I thought, wow, Luthen really let himself go.
Right. Yeah, that was a fat suit, but yeah.
And to answer your earlier question, how does Andor relate to real world revolutions? It's Disney. It's a cleaned up version of a real world revolution that succeeds. Often they don't succeed. Often they fail because usually it's a small number of disorganized people fighting a larger entity, an empire, or a kingdom, or a country like the US. And so the revolutions fail. One significant um, exception is the US Revolution against the British. That succeeded. And that's not what we see in the Andor series. What we see in the Andor series is more like the maybe the Vietnamese versus the US and the French, or the Cuban Revolution. It's outsiders, guerrilla fighters, and then building up a military that can actually take on, you know, a conventional military of a government.
Well, you know, if
Yeah.
we're talking about history, you know, it's a good thing you mentioned, you know, the American Revolution, because, you know, as Americans, we're taught in school how great the Revolution was and how great our country is and our founding fathers were for going through it. And it's only been in the first few generations that historians, my father's a historian, so I know these things, that historians have gotten beyond the hagiography, you know, beyond the national myths, to take a more objective look at it. I remember one book on the Revolution. I forget who it was for, but it said that, you know, the history of the American Revolution thus far has been has been you know warped by hagiography on one side of the Atlantic and collective amnesia on the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, as Americans, we have a sort of a default sympathy for the underdog. And we often think of ourselves as the underdog, even though we're really not.
Yeah. So the point is, I think um, even our own real world history cleans up the revolutions and the counter, you know, actions against it. Whereas in actual revolutions, there's a lot of innocent people getting killed, bystanders getting killed, dedicated workers like Cyril and Deidre. Deidre becomes a little bit evil, but they're a fun couple in that show. And they end up getting killed. So wars are terrible, revolutions are terrible, lots of people get killed. All that being said, as art entertainment, Andor is interesting because Disney typically doesn't release projects like that. It's Disney releases, you know, cleaned up violence like Marvel movies or the original Star Wars movies, which are like magical space wizards with swords and, you know, and ships blowing up and without seeing any carnage. So this is sort of a dark Star Wars type show for Disney to release, and that's sort of puzzling as to why they did it. I'm assuming because Rogue One was a success, they let the creators of Rogue One run with this one and left them alone, and thus we ended up with this show. And this show is probably going to be an anomaly. I don't think there'll be many Andor type shows in the future.
Yeah, and that was something I actually pointed out in a lot of my reviews, which is I absolutely love the show, and I'm very sad when I see it because I know we're not going to get something like this either ever again or for a very long time. And you don't have to look any further than Disney's recent Star Wars conference, where the newest movies they announced, one was called Starfighter, I think, that's with Ryan Gosling and is directed by the guy who did Deadpool Wolverine. So it's not going to probably be very substantive. You know, I don't think it's going to be like Driver or Drive in Space. And the other one that they're releasing is Mandalorian and Grogu, which haven't they already beaten that to death with seasons what season 3 of The Mandalorian, because it could have wrapped at season 2, which even season 2 is a bunch of fan service nonsense, which I was on board with at the time. Like at the time, I was like, "Oh my god, that's awesome! Bo-Katan's in it, and Ahsoka Tano, and you have God, who was the other character? Oh yeah, Luke Skywalker. That part I didn't like so much. You know, I wish anyone but Luke showed up at that point, but that
Well, people like Grogu and people like the Mandalorian, so they'll keep making those until people start to hate him.
yeah, well, people already
I
didn't.
want to make one point here about about this being a Disney production. I think in some ways the rules that Disney puts on its on its productions, for example, no dismemberment allowed. That's a Disney rule. I think in some cases that really worked in this show's favor because it ended up being a show that's very adult without being too explicit. So it's unlike, some shows like, oh, what's an example? Like The Sopranos. Okay. That is deliberately a disgusting show. Fitting the characters and the setting. Well, this one's not disgusting.
Well, this is more, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The show ended up becoming more discussions about philosophy and why people form rebellions, how legitimate governments fall. So yeah, it's like a political discussion, but with lots of interesting visuals from Star Wars.
Yeah, very much. The only thing I didn't like about the second season is that, and you mentioned this before, Mike, is that right at the beginning, Cassian gets captured by this People's Front of Judea.
Right. That kind of the rebels who are not very well organized yet.
Yeah, that plot point kind of, I liked what they were doing with it, but it kind of dragged on for too long. It could have been one episode, it could have been part of it, but they make it for like 2 full episodes where we kind of already get the point. But I think that was somewhere that was probably a case where Disney needed more episodes. They wanted like 12 total, so they said, okay, we'll write more of this sort of guerrilla warfare where the rebels aren't getting along with each other and we see them in these rough phases, but we're going to just stretch it out a bit. And it didn't quite work because none of those characters were really memorable.
Like I said, I thought they were a bit heavy-handed with all the People's Front of Judea stuff, because the actual People's Front of Judea did not resort to using a rock, paper, scissors game.
Oh God, I forgot about that part. That was ridiculous. Yeah. It's supposed to be a heavy show, and all of a sudden they're playing rock, paper, scissors. I'm going, huh?
Yeah.
Like, this is supposed to be a big scene. But yeah, I forgot about that completely.
And something I noticed is that pretty much everybody in that group was young, right? It looked like a bunch of college kids.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like young soldiers, yeah.
Well, I mean, in the real world, lots of young people join revolutions, so that is not inaccurate.
Well, I'm not saying it is inaccurate. I'm just saying that it would have been more interesting to have different kinds of people, like some people with more life experience in it.
Yeah, one problem I saw with that episode and a bunch of episodes in the series, camera.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not used to this. Sorry.
That's right. You're doing a good job, but the camera's over there.
Okay.
One problem I saw with the entire series, the two segments is some episodes were slower than they needed to be. I think that may have lost some audiences. If the Star Wars regular movie speed is 9, we don't have to go to 3 on these episodes. We can go to 6, right? We can go to 7. Some of the earlier stuff was way too slow cinema. I mean, I don't mind slow cinema, but way too.
Yeah, I mean, that coming from you is a big thing. Yeah.
For Star Wars, I felt it was unnecessarily slow. But on the bright side, the detective arc, I mean, sort of the spy movie arc in season 2, I think maybe episodes 4, 5, and 6 when he dresses up and goes to Gorman.
Oh, when he pretends to be a fashion designer and he's supposed to kill Dedra.
Those 3 episodes could work as one movie, sort of like a spy movie. And I thought that was that segment, those 3 episodes. I forget exactly what numbers they were. Maybe 4, 5, 6.
Yeah,
I think it was 4 or 5.
Yeah. I think
it could have been, because it was like number 8 in season 2 is like when the shit hits the fan and it gets really interesting and very action oriented.
I thought those 3, 4, 5, 6 were very good, just as entertainment. Star Wars elements. Probably the best episodes that I saw in the 2 series.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of an 8 through 12 guy. Well, even 12 was a bit. It was just kind of okay. It felt like it was just setting up the stages for Rogue One. And they did, because it felt like they sort of finished the story in a way. Once Mon Mothma is taken from the Senate over to Yavin and everyone gets together, it's like, well, okay, the show's over now. But of course, they have to make it ramp up into Rogue One. But I mean, I also didn't mind it at all. I really like the way they brought in K2SO in the show. It wasn't, because originally what they were going to do was they were going to start the show with K2SO being I think like captured or rescued or something like that from an Imperial base at like episode 1 of the entire series. And that's when Tony Gilroy came in and he said, no, don't do that. That's too Star Wars. We're going to, do this, and this. And then that's when they made him the showrunner and it became the show that it was. But yeah, he's utilized towards the end, and he's a bit of humor that you really need after just seeing, just hours and hours and hours of depressing content. But I like the doom and gloom of it. I like how depressing it is, because it's more realistic within a completely fantastical setting, but it gives it a degree of weight to it that we haven't seen from Star Wars. And it shows how you can actually take smart writing and incorporate it into something that isn't that smart. For instance, Predator, that was just a movie about machismo and one-liners. And now it's about tribalism. It's about different cultures coming together to fight a greater threat. It could be like an allegory for global warming or whatever other global event you have. And Andor takes a property that's supposed to be meant for kids and easy to understand and makes it very complicated. If a kid was to watch the show, he would be bored shitless by it.
But I don't think Andor's for kids, though. I think I think Rogue One
is supposed to be. Yeah,
Rogue One is not a kids movie.
It's still got kids stuff, like the whole Darth Vader killing everyone in the hallway. You're like, oh, that's not for kids, that's fine. But it's like the kids are gonna watch it, and they're gonna be like, oh, cool, when they see it. They're gonna love it.
Dark movie. It's not pure good versus evil. So Andor is not really a kids show. I think a lot of kids will be bored by it.
Oh no, it's not a kids show at all.
Yeah, and it's amazing how Disney greenlit this, because I'm gonna guess they were sort of desperate, and like you said earlier, Sujewa, they trusted Tony Gilroy because he fixed up Rogue One when it pretty much wasn't doing very well.
Rogue One did well, I think. Using whatever criteria they use internally, and that's probably why Gilroy got left alone to do whatever he wanted with the Andor series. Now, the original plan was to have 1 season per year, and that would have been interesting, because one of the things that I didn't like about the second season was, some stuff was brought up, then they were completely abandoned because we would go on to 1 year later, right? So there's more stuff that the show could have really gotten into. It could have been a 5-year project where, as far as releasing goes, where you get 12 episodes that covers 1 year, then things keep going. But Gilroy said it would have been too difficult to do because the actors would age out, they would get older, and he himself didn't think he could commit, to doing 60 episodes over, 5 years. something like that, something crazy like that. So he came up with this new structure.
Well, I have to say, I'm always glad to have uh, a little bit of a good thing
Mhm.
rather
Mhm.
than a lot of a bad thing,
Yeah.
or a good thing that turns bad because there's too much of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, pretty much all TV shows start to lose their way around season 4.
Yeah. That happened with like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like after season 4, it wasn't as good.
Mhm.
Uh I think, well, The Simpsons, God, maybe after the first 10 years, like, I don't know. The Simpsons has sucked longer than it's been good. And I don't know who the hell these people are who still watch The Simpsons, like the current ones, because
Yeah,
they're terrible.
a phrase like the first 10 years is an absurd statement when it comes to entertainment. That's a
Yeah.
long time.
Oh, it's a long time, but it's been around for like what, 30 years now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Another way this could have been done is releasing 5 different movies to cover the 5 years leading up to the revolution. But we have what we have, and I think it's pretty good as
Yeah.
far as if you like a mixture of realism and mixture of Star Wars.
Speaking of the realism, something I really wanted to talk about is how this show portrayed the family of Mon Mothma. I grew up in the
Hmm.
Washington, D.C. area in political circles, not among the powerful, but let's say among people who are among the powerful.
Mhm.
And let me tell you that the depiction of a political family is dead on accurate.
Mm.
Right. We have Mon Mothma, who's the political hero. She's trying to save the world, the galaxy, and in the process, she's neglecting her child. Because you can't save the world and your family at the same time. You just can't.
Hmm.
And we have the spouse who's an alcoholic and just stopped giving a shit years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
All these characters are very familiar in DC.
Yeah, it's her. It's funny because she and Luthen both share something in common, although they're very different people. Is that they both had to sacrifice
Mhm.
basically everything, whatever comfort Luthen had, if he ever did have it, because they sort of established in season 2 that he's this soldier who suffers from PTSD, and I don't know if he ever really had a great life, but he basically has that whole great speech about sacrifice, and that happens with Mon. Her husband no longer really loves her. And I mean, as we can see when he's with another woman towards the end of the
I
show.
loved that actually. I thought that was
Yeah.
the best parts of it. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean,
That,
we already didn't like him, but now we see what a scumbag he is.
yeah. Well, it reinforced why she left him in the first place. And then the fact that she basically had to sell out her daughter so
Yeah.
then she could borrow a massive cache of funds to launder to fund the rebellion. That's something where it's like and she even gives her daughter the chance to leave. She says, "You don't have to do this, you don't have to get married." But the daughter wants to do it. Basically, her life's over. And then once she makes that big speech, that's when basically she knows this is it. This is the point of no return. And it's a sacrifice she makes. It's a sacrifice Luthen makes. And Cassian Andor constantly wants to not join the rebellion. That was one problem with this character I had, where he's saying, "Oh, I hate the Empire. I'm going to fight them." And, he's sent to a jail. His life's hell. And then he comes back and then he goes, "I'm going to leave and I just want comfort." But that's sort of like his character flaw in a way, is
Mhm.
that he kind of bounces back onto what makes him immediately gratified rather than what he should be doing, because his life will never have peace. It will never have prosperity as long as the empire is still around. And, of course, the thing that pushes him to that is when Bix leaves him, his girlfriend. But yeah, Cassian really has a sad, sad life when you think about it in this show.
Mhm.
He
Hold
never,
on. One thing I wanted to add before we move down from it. I
yeah,
don't know how irrational Cassian's approach to the Empire is, because even within the fictional Star Wars universe, getting rid of the Empire or similar entities is nearly impossible to do. They keep
yeah,
coming back. They're very powerful. So I think most people in that galaxy if they can stay clear of the empire and lead their life, they would do it. I think that's what most people are doing. I think in that universe, I think the rebels are like this extreme fringe, and of course, people like Darth Vader and uh, and the Emperor are the other extreme fringe on the side of the government, right? So I think Cassian always trying to, leave this crazy adventure and then go live out his life. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think most people probably feel that way when it comes to fringe, hopeless rebellions versus gigantic empires.
Yeah, most of us would like to imagine ourselves as heroes who will fight the good fight, but how many people really do that?
Depends on
not,
depends
not
on
a
the
lot.
situation.
Or
Depends,
we half-ass it.
well, I mean, in the case of Vietnam or Cuba, well, Vietnam, I guess, is the closest thing to Star Wars.
Well, yeah, because
A lot of
Lucas kind of
Vietnamese,
inspired it directly from it at the
yeah, a
time.
lot of Vietnamese did get involved on the side of trying to liberate Vietnam from the colonial forces of France and then the U.S. So, at an early point, if you can avoid it, I think people avoid it. But later on, when it's either we fight or we get killed in large numbers from these imperial forces, I think then people join.
Yeah. Um, the one thing that really kind of blows me away with the show is how it utilizes empathy. Because when you look at a character like Cyril Karn, he's a guy where, through his point of view, he sees the rebellion as anarchists.
Hmm.
Whenever he sees Cassian Andor, there's nothing but insanity that leads his way. When he kills the two primo court cops, and then when he tries to hunt him down in Ferrix, and of course Luthen comes in, attacks, like basically stages an attack for all the Imperials out there, or in this case, it was like Primo cops who were, I don't think they're Imperial. He ended up joining the ISB that made him Imperial afterwards.
Yeah, the
But
cops for corporate security.
yeah, yeah. What once that all happened, he kind of just saw it through his point of view, and it kind of reinforced it. Like, yeah, this guy killed two officers of ours. The person who works in our office doesn't care at all. He basically says, "Oh, this guy was, a degenerate. Like, don't worry about it." But of course, he wants to do the right thing. He wants to stand up for justice and honor. But unfortunately, the empire doesn't stand for that, and he doesn't learn it until it's too late. Where, I mean, his ending is just mwah,
Yeah, he
fucking
was
Yeah,
he was
chef's
a true
kiss.
believer of the system.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's a fascinating character.
yeah,
I think he's great as a sort of tragic villain, anti-villain,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
I thought he was
Yeah.
a good character. I mean, just like a regular person who really believes in the government and is super into his job. I mean, sort of an underdeveloped personality. Not a character, but there are people like that.
Oh yeah, and we see also his relationship with his mother is
hmm
fascinating.
yeah,
That the actress who played her, Catherine Hunter, I believe that's her name.
hmm
I've always liked her, whatever I've seen her in. She's one of these actresses who's not beautiful at all, but she's excellent at what she does. And, you know,
I thought she was okay
yeah.
looking for a mom character. I don't know why you have to say not beautiful at all.
Well, I mean that in the best way. I really do.
No problem.
I mean
yeah.
that. Not every woman has to be beautiful. Not every
Yeah,
female
I'm saying
character
that
needs
actress
to
looks
be
fine.
beautiful.
That actress looks fine.
Well, she's very old now, but no, I mean, she was great. She was great as this condescending, gaslighting mom
Mhm.
who, whatever her son does, is never good enough. She's like, why don't I put in a good word to your Uncle Harlow, and then he'll get you a job? Or, she like, because that's ended up what ended up happening. He worked like a crappy office job, and because basically Andor, when he or really when Luthen sabotaged Cyril's operation to take him down, to take Andor down, it basically ruined his career. He got embarrassed and he had to build his way up. And I love the way they designed the logistics of the Empire in this show, where you see basically what their office desk job setting would be like. You see how they carry out investigations, and then the most effective thing is when Andor is taken to that prison, you really get an idea of how evil the Empire is without just seeing them blow up planets.
Mhm.
It's more of like a slow descent into how horrible they are, because that prison is like legitimately scary. It's this very like clean white THX 1138 looking environment where all you do is work constantly. The only food you get is like through these little tubes that you drink out of. You get electrically shocked to death for no good reason at all, and you're just going to constantly be resentenced, and there's no way to get out of it because they need those parts of the Death Star to be built. Like,
That's a good way to show problems with the Empire.
Yeah, to show how a system works.
Mhm.
Specifically how their prison system works. And yeah, it is very scary. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine a prison that's not scary.
Mhm.
That's the whole point of a prison,
Mhm.
is to frighten people.
It would have been
into
interesting.
obedience.
It would have been interesting if they had a good, likable, just completely good Imperial character, right? That for some reason was in the show, and obviously he would have to get killed in the end. That would have been interesting because a system so vast like the Empire, there's bound to be just good people who are just working for the Empire.
They did that with Finn, and he was horribly written, even from movie one. Like, one thing that really bothered me with that character in those sequel trilogies is that this guy was raised by the Empire, probably. He joined in their beliefs. He probably grew up with these fellow soldiers. And then moments later, he's murdering them. And not only is he murdering them, but he's like bragging about it with Poe. He's like, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" Like, yeah, you killed your childhood friend. Like, there's no dimensionality to this character at all. And then, of course, we saw through his useless side quest in The Last Jedi, and then basically his like they didn't do anything with him in Rise of Skywalker. You saw how, oh yeah, there are good people in the Empire, but they're few and far between, and usually they turn coat.
My headcanon is Rise of Skywalker did not happen.
Yeah, Rise of Skywalker is a weird movie. But back to Andor. What Andor is missing, obviously, is the Jedi magic that makes Star Wars show special, right? The Star Wars movie special. What did you think, Mike, about lack of Jedis in Andor?
Good. I'm sick of the freaking Jedi, because Star Wars is a huge universe. And if you really think about it, how many people really know about the existence of the Jedi, especially when the Empire pretty much exterminated them after Order 66? This is a show about real people in a real situation. And one thing I really dug with it is that there's hardly any alien characters in it at all. It's a very human occupied world. I think if you like went into that prison that Andor was in, and if you just saw like some big blue alien looking guy walking next to him, you wouldn't take it as seriously. And they kind of had to pull back on a lot of the science fiction elements, and the most science fiction or science fantasy, whatever you want to call it, imaginable property possible. And I'm glad they didn't put in Magic Jedi, because this is about people who are like you and me. They can't jump 1,000 feet in the air.
I have a question, actually. Something that's always bothered me about Jedi and the Force is, does anybody know what the Force actually is?
Mm-hmm,
Do they ever explain it? I know they don't, in a way that makes logical sense.
Camera.
No, it's mixed. You're right about that. It's mixed because in the original trilogy, we think that the Force is the energy that surrounds us and binds us, and then in the Phantom Menace, we find out that oh wait, no, it's actually a microbiome. It's in your blood. It's midichlorians. So yeah, they never make it really clear.
Well, in the Star Wars universe, as I understand it, the Force is a thing that the Jedi can tap into to do amazing things, and the dark side of that is what Sith Lords can tap into to do amazing things, like moving, large objects, etc., etc. But basically, it's magic in a sci-fi show.
Yeah, and you can, and they kind of write whatever plot armor they want with it too. You can have Princess Leia floating around in the middle of space.
Mhm.
You can have Luke Skywalker project himself onto another planet. You can have people jump really high up and fight in the middle of lava. They're superhumans, pretty much. They're space wizards, and it's great that they took a show and they grounded it where it's not just space wizards. It's just like people living their day-to-day lives. You have the people of Ferrix who are just trying to survive. And this show really shows how crappy it is to live in the Star Wars universe because they show the different classes. You have like the lower class, which is Ferrix. And then like in season 2, you had the middle class, which is Gorman, who basically like the Gorman.
They're like France. I would
Yeah.
say they're upper middle.
Yeah, they're like the French Resistance, the Gorman Front,
Yeah,
which
Right. But the Gorman planet itself is like France, which is like a first world unique economy. So
Well,
they're in the upper class.
it struck me as a sort of a combination of France, Germany, Italy. So
Yeah.
Switzerland, maybe.
Could be.
Switzerland.
Well, actually, they did design Gorman off of like 1933 France, pretty much,
Mhm.
and which would make a lot of sense. The Gorman have like an Italian feel, especially like when Cassian's playing the fashion designer, Varian Sky, and but yeah, but you kind of get like a French Resistance feeling, and it's kind of a poetic ending because you have the main French Resistance guy who doesn't want to resort to violence, but everyone's telling him, look, there's no other alternative at this point. We have to get violent. And then, of course, when does he finally get violent? When he kills Cyril, when Cyril's attacking Cassian. And it's kind of like them telling the audience, look, sometimes this is how these revolutions happen because people end up getting hurt, they end up getting killed, and people who don't want to kill other people end up having to do it. I mean, and that's one thing I really love about the show is they really show you sort of like a reality of the violence, a reality of the oppression. Like I never thought I'd see a Star Wars show where there would be rape in it, but it works because this is what these people would do. And people say, how can you put rape in Star Wars? It's like, because they're space Nazis. You think Nazis they didn't rape Holocaust victims? Of course they did. And that's just realistically showing what these people are capable of and how horrible they are and why they had to be taken down. It's not just, oh, we're bad mustache twirling villains who will blow up another planet. It's really showing you the inner workings of the Empire and how they even lie to their own people because of what they're doing is so horrible. On your points, Sujewa, when you're talking about how it was like too slow moving, I felt like episodes 1 through 7, like it was all a setup for Gorman, pretty much. Gorman Massacre.
Yeah, about the evil that's shown. I mean, it's a cleaned up version. But yeah,
Yeah.
in the real world, large governments and also during rebellions, all kinds of horrible things happen. That's why it's best to avoid wars if possible, because once war begins in any form, lots of people are going to start getting killed and destroyed.
There's something that we haven't discussed now that I think we need to, which is, the show isn't just about how powerful the empire is. It's also about the empire rotting from within. Okay, in a way, you can see the empire and the rebellion as really two sides of the same system. The empire really gave birth to the rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That,
I mean, well, if it weren't for the Empire, a rebellion wouldn't have been formed and there wouldn't have been a galactic war. But I mean, the way it's funny, the way Andor handles politics is the way the prequels should have handled the politics. Because in the prequels, you got into the whole trade dispute. It wasn't really that interesting. And then they grant emergency powers to Jar Jar Binks. So then he could, they give Jar Jar Binks the power to basically make Chancellor Palpatine into Emperor Palpatine eventually, which is George Lucas's funny way of saying, "Hey, I know you guys hate Jar Jar. How about he ruins the galaxy for you?" But it takes these complicated political issues that children understand. I certainly know when I watched the Phantom Menace, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about with trade disputes. It wasn't until I became an adult that I realized it. But
but
this show,
those are tough things to. I mean, about my complaint about the pacing in the Andor show. Political discussions are tough things to show in a fiction feature that's made as entertainment for the movie theaters. I mean,
which
either it has to be like a, political drama for adults, or it has to be a fast moving adventure show, which
yeah,
Star Wars movies are. So doing it on TV or on the web as a episodic serial episodic show, yeah, that's the best medium. And/or
yeah,
episodes are the best medium to mix in realistic politics and some action adventure.
yeah.
You
Well,
mentioned the prequel trilogy. I didn't see that until I was an adult,
mm,
and it really is amazing. I mean, it is beyond description.
mhm.
And yeah, I got the distinct sense that this is a series about politics written by somebody who hates politics and doesn't understand it at all.
Well, George Lucas is probably not a great screenwriter
No,
when it
he's
comes
not.
Yeah.
to when it comes to stuff like that. You need someone like Tony Gilroy, who did
Michael Clayton,
Michael Clayton.
and
That's what I was thinking.
yeah, like helped write the Bourne Identity movies. Yeah,
Someone who is really into that subject to be able to write it well for the screen.
Yeah, I mean, George Lucas seems to not understand subtext at all.
He's not a great
no,
screenwriter, but he imagined the Star Wars universe, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
the first Star Wars, for what it is, was really good, and had a significant effect on the world and in the entertainment world.
yeah, and the reason this show works so well is because not only because it's for adults and because it's complicated, but it actually is disturbingly relevant when it didn't try to be. Because because everyone was interviewing Tony Gilroy, he's like, "So, is this about the current administration?" He's like, "No, it's just history, and because history pretty much repeats itself, but you can't help but watch the show and see how history ends up becoming what we're living in now." And I'm going to play a short clip. It's only 17 seconds, but there was a great speech from Mon Mothma that I made as like the social media tag today before I started rolling. But here's a scene, and tell me how this really kind of hits hard today, if it does.
Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
Yeah. So when I hear that line, I can't help but think about how not only the people who are in charge now are skewering the truth to basically fool the people into voting for whatever they want to vote for, and they can create an authoritarian state. But the fact that we now have technology with artificial intelligence where you can even take a piece of footage of someone that doesn't even exist and have them say something that they didn't say, and we're slipping further and further and further into an abyss where truth will no longer matter and we'll die choking on our own lives.
Yeah,
What do you guys think about the show's relevancy?
I don't know about that because ever since the invention of modern governments and modern city states 5,000 or whatever years ago, rulers have used propaganda and spies and religion and appealing to greed to get power and stay in power. I don't think the current period is significantly different than what has happened before. It's just we get to see more of it now because everyone has phones and everyone can start up a blog and get on the web. It's just better documented. I don't think we're in any worse of a situation than the 1940s because in Nazi Germany they got super into controlling the media so that they can carry out their evil plan to do what they want to do.
And it brings up the whole question of is there an objective reality? What does that mean?
Well, no, there's no objective reality. It's just we have to, reality is something people agree on.
Yeah, what we need is not some, capital T truth. What we need is a system where people who have different understandings of the truth can nonetheless get along, work through their differences for, a common good.
Well, it depends on, I think, how far they take that. Because there are just some things that are objectively wrong and I think morally reprehensible that have become sort of a norm. And now we're kind of having a culture war between woke culture and maggots. And I feel like the maggots are the worst side, but when it comes to woke culture, yeah, there's some times where I go, you know what? That guy didn't need to be canceled, or you know what? We don't need to normalize certain things, or we don't need to instantly jump on someone because they use a certain term that we don't agree with anymore. Like if someone accidentally says midget instead of dwarf, they shouldn't like instantly be canceled. But
I just want to make a point that you're talking about morality. People, I think, especially on social media, become way too judgmental, and way too prone to judge a person's morals based on their politics. A person can agree with you on every single political point that you hold and still be, morally reprehensible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, the two sides, woke left versus mega right, these are fringe elements in society, even though they're heavily represented on social media. The middle, a lot of people are not on either of these extremes. So that's something to keep in mind. What you see on social media is not necessarily the entire truth.
Yeah.
Well, there's it seems that on the internet, every discussion you have on the internet sort of goes toward the extreme. No matter what group it is, no matter what subject it is. And I don't know what it is about the internet or social media that has that effect. Probably it's the echo chamber effect.
Yeah.
I think that's the big problem, not necessarily propaganda, but echo chambers.
Also, the cultural norm of wanting to win as opposed to understand, right? Everyone wants to win. So in a conversation or a debate, if we say, well, this is not about winning or losing, let's understand what's happening, that's a different, more of a philosophical approach. So I think this is why countries like the US and every country and other countries have this. They need philosophy as an active part of regular life, right? As opposed to politics, which is debating power, or religion, which is debating stories and moral control using religion. Philosophy is a place where you don't necessarily have to win or lose in a given argument. You can explore a subject through, and different perspectives and try to understand what are these people saying and is it good or bad.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I feel like now we live in a culture where we just kind of repeat what other people say or what we read
Yeah,
instead of forming our own opinion, which is the echo chamber, as you were talking about. Yeah, because when you go on Facebook or
One other thing, a clear example of winning and losing and not being a philosophical discussion is when a foreign war breaks out, people immediately on the internet saying, whose side are you on? No, we don't
Mhm.
have to pick a side. We have to take a look at it and
Yeah.
see what is going on and how is it relevant to our lives.
Yes, it is possible. It is absolutely possible for a person to be a good person and not care about Israel and Palestine.
That's well. Here's my thing with it. When people ask me my opinion on it, I go, I don't live there. I don't know nearly enough about their history. It sounds like they both done horrible things to each other. What, like, how is a guy living in Chicago in the
Right.
middle of the United States gonna know jack shit about any of this stuff? Like, I can read stuff on the internet, but
Right.
the internet will skewer to what you want to believe.
Right.
You know, because when you go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, it's everything that you click on, that you like, that you dislike, that you
Right.
comment on. It'll just keep getting fed to you and fed to you and fed
Yeah,
to
the
you.
algorithm
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Because they want you to stay,
Mhm.
Mhm.
on whatever site you're on for as long as possible.
Yeah.
So what we need in American society and worldwide, and this does exist in Europe and Asia to I think maybe a better degree, we need to be able to discuss subjects like foreign wars, ideology, new ways of doing things, or trying to bring back old ways of doing things without immediately needing a win or a loss, or without using every conversation to build support for a certain end, right? We need
Yeah.
general philosophical discussions on things that a lot of people don't understand and are being pushed to support or disavow.
Yeah. And we also need to actually have a discourse in society
Right.
instead of just constantly saying, "Oh, well, you don't agree with me, you're a piece of shit," you know? Because
Right.
there are people, like, I've had people who I would, who raised me, who are the sweetest people in the world, but yet they have some pretty bad beliefs, which people will say, "Well, you're a racist, you're a terrible person." Like, well, maybe that person's a good person, but they believe in these horrible things, but it doesn't show their true colors. What shows your true colors are your actions and what you do.
Yeah,
And this is
something like racism. Racism is something that permeates the environment and it affects all of us. So to say that somebody said or did something racist, it's not necessarily saying that that person is horrible or it shouldn't. It's just that the person made an error, like all of us do.
And also, people are products of their time period.
Yes, they are.
If we look at people 2,000 years ago living in Greece or Rome or even India, we would be like, wow, those people are crazy. Look at the wacky beliefs they have. And 2,000 years from now, people will look back on the United States 2025 and they'll be like, yeah, wow, what was Sujewa thinking? And living in Brooklyn, saying the wacky things he's saying.
Yeah.
Interestingly, speaking of that, I just I've been watching on YouTube a version of the musical called "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum."
No.
Oh well,
I've heard of it.
It's one of Stephen Sondheim's musicals, and it's great. I really loved it. And it's a comedy that is specifically based on comedies from ancient Rome. So it's not just set in ancient Rome; it's taken from ancient Roman materials. So I was watching it, and I was sort of imagining, I wonder what Gen Z or whatever will think of this comedy set in a world where slavery and prostitution are just accepted.
Yeah.
It's just accepted. One of the characters is a pimp who owns a bunch of prostitutes.
Different time periods, different countries have different standards, not necessarily good or evil. That's just that's why I said everything is relative, and it all depends on who's looking at it. So if we want to have a agreement on the best way to do things, we have to talk to people.
Yeah, yeah, because when we talk about good or evil, it's like this show works because it really utilizes empathy. It really makes us understand. Like Dedra Miro might be the most unempathetic character on the show, and even to a certain degree, like you understand she's a woman who's working in a male-led office, and she's just trying to prove herself, and in order to
Yeah,
do
she's
that,
a product of her environment and upbringing.
Yeah, I
yeah,
thought actually that actress, I forget her name, but she did a
Denise Gough
very,
or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
she did a very good job of
hmm yeah,
portraying a person who had been raised in some fascist kinderblock.
Hmm.
I mean, you
yeah.
look at her and you think, this person just doesn't comprehend normal human emotions or relations.
Hmm.
Yeah,
You know,
just
Yeah.
that scowl she makes all the time.
he's much better portrayed than, for example, you mentioned Finn,
Hmm.
who grew
Yeah,
up in a similar environment, and in 5 minutes he flips to the good guy.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought Deidre was a good character, and the actress who played her did a great job. It's unfortunate that towards the end of the series, season two, you kind of, they kind of stopped dealing with her, and then she ended up in jail. Uh,
well, I love the way they wrapped up her story because it was a cautionary tale. Like her and Cyril, his final moments is fantastic because there's just that little shot where he's lowering the after he's about to kill Andor, and Andor says, "Who are you?" Which basically means like this guy spent years hunting this guy, and he's who the hell he is.
right.
But as he's lowering that rifle, he begins to kind of realize he's got that little look in his face, and he kind of has that little exhale, like, oh my God, I'm on the wrong side. And right when he's about to change, bam,
Hmm.
kills.
Yeah,
Killed.
another way to go with those two characters were to bring them into the rebellion, and that would have been a different type of
Ugh,
story. It would
yeah,
have
that
been
would
more interesting.
have. That would have been that would have been too Star Wars if they made him in the rebellion. I'm glad that they end up suffering for
Mhm.
supporting the Empire, not because the Empire is bad and they suffer, but because it just shows how people are easily mind washed and
Mhm.
manipulated into working for someone who's just going to ultimately betray them, which is what happens to both those characters. Or
Into
I
working
just
into working in a negative system. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
yeah,
wanted to mention, talking about Cyril's death scene. I When I watched it, I did not think that he believed he was on the wrong side. I think what happened to him was he saw that somebody else, who he had a kind of obsession with,
Hmm.
sees the world, the galaxy, in a very different way than he does.
hmm
And he wasn't used to realizing that, to
yeah,
actually thinking about that.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
he had this build-up hatred and
Yeah.
story in his mind about Cassian, and then when Cassian has has not given any thought to Cyril, then Cyril's like, "Oh, what this is a sort of a strange situation." And then
yeah.
he paused too long, and he got shot.
Well, I feel like he thinks like he's on the wrong side because just before that, he encounters Dedra just to find out that she's been lying
Oh
to
yeah,
him the
by
whole
that point, yeah,
time.
by that point,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that basically everything that he's been helping out with and fighting for, he basically helped support a genocide. So when
Right.
he's like, and he puts down the rifle, I think for a second, like, I don't think it wasn't like an immediate, oh my God, I'm on the wrong side moment, but more of a, what am I doing
Right,
kind
right,
of
Yeah.
moment.
right.
Yeah, I
And
think it was it's a process. It's a psychological process. Again, unlike Finn, people don't change their worldview in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think um the Andor writers could have done an interesting job bringing those two into the rebellion, and if they were doing 12 shows for each year and it was stretched out like that, I think that would have been done. But this ending is also good.
Yeah, I feel like if they joined the rebellion, it would have been too much of a Star Wars thing to do. It's like, okay, you're gonna join the good guys now. Ba-da, ba, ba-da, ba,
That
ba,
happens.
ba, ba-da,
That
ba.
happens all the time in the real world in real revolutions.
It does, but it's much more interesting to see someone kind of die with their backwards beliefs. You
I
know?
guess. I
Yeah,
guess to some people it is. Uh,
yeah.
this one works as is, but if we had more time, those writers could have made it interesting. I
They
mean,
could have, but it could have
the,
also been too slow if it was for like 5 seasons.
no,
I
no,
think two was just good enough.
no, the lots of in lots of wars, trying to recruit the enemy into working into for your side is a big thing. The civil war in Sri Lanka ended because the government was able to get one of the rebel generals to defect to his side with I think maybe 5,000 or 10,000 troops. Plus, that gives the government new legitimacy in their battle against the rebels. So there's a entirely different and interesting ways to portray that. You know, how does someone go from fighting and killing for one side and then goes to the other side? And so it could have been done in a really good way.
Well, now that you mentioned that, yeah, it does often happen in reality, and in reality, a lot of the people who do these things are not that great people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're still scumbags.
Well, I mean, in anyone in government or anyone involved in the war become not necessarily great people. These people are considered great only when historians write about it for future governments. They're turned into something else. Actual generals and kings and warriors are not not like they're not Seinfeld. They're not fun people to hang out with.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? This makes me think of Albert Speer.
Mhm.
Hmm.
He's an example. He was a top-ranked Nazi, and he was the one who sort of, confessed to his crimes. The others did not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny when they did have a character who pretty much was working with the rebellion, who was in the Empire, and that was Lonnie Young. And he
Right,
was the
right,
guy,
right.
yeah, he was the guy who was feeding information about Axis
Mhm.
to Luthen Rail. And of course, although Young died by Luthen's hand because I think Luthen didn't want him to, get tortured and then
Right.
reveal
That's
information about the Death Star.
that's what he knew. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think through that character, you kind of got the idea of like, yeah, this is what happens when someone works for the other side and leads a double life because he's got a wife, he's got kids, and he doesn't want to see anything happen to them or to himself. And of course, the good guys, they lie to him. Luthen says, okay, I'll take you to Yavin. You'll be all right. Now tell me about the Death Star. Or he doesn't know it's called the Death Star at that point. But yeah, but it's like he was an interesting character for that aspect. I think maybe if you took, I think Cyril would have been the character who would have been more interesting to see go to the
Cyril was going
rebellion.
in
But
that direction. Deidre
yeah,
it might not be possible to change
she's too far gone. She's a
unless
nut. Yeah.
symbols break her out of jail.
Yeah, I mean they could, but that's. I just feel like that's just too much like the good guys fight. And yeah, that if you handle it well and there's enough nuance and
That's Rogue
subtext to
One
it,
basically. Rogue One basically does that.
yeah, Rogue One is Star Wars porn. I mean, the movie's
Yeah,
enjoyable, but
Andor comes out of Rogue One. So without Rogue One, there's no Andor.
oh yeah, well, I mean, thank God. I mean, at the end of the day, Rogue One turned out to give us this beautiful present that was Andor. But as a movie, Rogue One just feels more like constant fan service
Yeah,
rather than
I like Rogue One. I thought it was different. Some maybe half of it felt like regular Star Wars, but I thought just from the beginning, just using a main character like you said earlier, who kills one of his own people in order to get out of a situation or keep him from confessing, what he knows to the Empire. I thought it was a more nuanced and darker story than any of the other Star Wars movies.
I mean, I think like the most nuanced Star Wars films that we got, and they're not very well. The Empire Strikes Back, And then Revenge of the Sith was just really that nuanced, but that's because
Yeah,
George
no, I
Lucas is very
I
great.
see big similarities between the Andor series and Rogue One versus the first three movies being their own thing, and then
Yeah.
the prequel series being their own thing. I would
Yeah.
put, I mean, obviously that's how they designed it, right? You could watch Andor season 1, Andor season 2, then go watch Rogue One.
Yeah.
And that would be an entire story altogether.
Yeah,
But
and they
this-
do a great job tying it all together. They
yeah,
really,
this is the Cassian Andrew, the Cassian Andor story.
yeah. I mean, what Andor kind of does what the Clone Wars did for the prequels, where they actually kind of made you care about stuff that was going on in here. Because the Clone Wars was just a bunch of clones that you could just wipe out, doesn't matter, and then you had a bunch of robots that you could kill, it doesn't matter. And I think with Andor, it took the simplistic moral elements of the Star Wars saga, and it made it much more complicated. And
Also, filmmaking wise,
very good. Yeah.
because it's happening in the 2020s, and the tech has gotten so much better. Andor series is probably some of the best technical filmmaking wise filmmaking in the Star Wars stories, in the Star Wars movies or shows. I thought, if you remember the Aldani heist episode, the one where the heist happens and the one right before with the TIE fighter just flying by.
Oh yeah, they actually make a TIE fighter scary too.
A lone TIE fighter
Yeah.
in a world, in a otherwise non-Star Wars type world. So I thought stuff like that really showed how filmmaking has improved in the Star Wars storytelling.
I think it's improved for this particular show, but I think everyone else is going to resort.
This show. We're talking about
Yeah. I feel like everyone else is going to resort to just using the egg, which is just this huge 3D environment with
I'm saying
rear projection.
Andor was an example of how good filmmaking could be done within the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, well, because the thing that they did with the show that was so smart is that they actually filmed a lot of it in real locations with real sets, and yet there is CGI used. Like if you watch the behind the scenes stuff, there's like a lot of sets with it's like a full set, but then there's some green screen in the background. And especially Coruscant, you can't physically film Coruscant, but it's not a show that's showing off the visual effects, and it's not just over relying on the upgraded version of the green screen, which is the egg now. It's much more about actually using real locations to make you feel like you're in a story depicting real people going through a real conflict.
Yeah, the prequels, when I watched them, I felt like I was watching, a video game. Like I was just looking over someone's shoulder while they played a video game. And there are times when it's comical how you can see the disconnect between the actors and their environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember one scene in particular. Obi-Wan Kenobi, is facing this huge robot General
Grievous,
General Grievous and Grievous brings out 4 lightsabers, does a little thing, and Ewan McGregor is in front of him, and he just sort of look like, oh, what's that?
Yeah, he looks like he's reacting to nothing. He's staring at a tennis ball instead of actually interacting with someone.
Yeah, he doesn't look like he's ready for a fight at all.
Yeah, the filmmaking tech and also just other filmmaking stuff in the prequels is not the best. The first 3 movies were pretty good because other directors handled the directing for Empire and Jedi, and Andor series is very good. But some of the other series like Obi-Wan and The Mandalorian was good.
Mandalorian looked good, but Mandalorian looked good, and then towards a certain point, it looks like some of season 3, you can't even see what's going on because they're just in that big cave with black water, and it's like you're like squinting to see what's on the screen. And then just like a lot of shows like Ahsoka or Obi-Wan, they look like it looks better than the prequels, but it still looks kind of sterile and fake, and they don't really look like they're fighting. Like when Obi-Wan's fighting Vader in the big climax in the end, like the rocks in the background look like a rear projection more than they're like actually like in this desolate place. Although I do love that fight between them in the end. Although
Yeah,
it's
there's a lot of
very
good stuff mixed in. It's a mixed bag, but Andor was really done well. I think
Yeah.
we've done about an hour, so let's wrap it up. I have a movie coming out, 53 Spaceships. Amanda has a book coming out called
A Joyful Noise.
That's right.
a
I'll have
joyful noise. Okay.
Joyful Noise.
A Joyful Noise.
It's about the punk music scene and someone who wins tickets to a show, right?
Yes. It's
Okay.
about the very vibrant punk and rock music scene in Washington D.C. in the 90s.
I'll
Yeah.
have information on that stuff on my social, on my websites, Amanda's website. And Mike, what do you have coming up?
Well, I got more movies I'm going to be reviewing. I'm going to be taking a little vacation next week, but I think we'll have some more podcast episodes. I'll have some more ideas that I'll pitch
Awesome.
out to other people. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And in the meantime, maybe I'll do some reaction videos of just some random movies I see. Well, but yeah, so far just taking a little week break from the written reviews, but I'll come back after that because I don't think I need to bend over backwards to see Megan 2.0. You know, like I think I can enjoy my time before I come back for Superman. Although I'll probably be back before then. But especially for the 4th of July, you know, it's like either I want to cover Born on the 4th of July or Team America, or maybe both. But no, thank you for coming on. I could talk about this show for hours because it's really something that's special. Before we take off, I want to get your final rating on the show, and we go because it's a bar atmosphere, 1 to 4 Guinnesses. So Amanda, we'll start with you. From 1 to 4 Guinnesses, what would you give this show?
I would give it 4 Guinnesses. I give it 5 Guinnesses.
All right, that's what I like to hear. Sujewa?
I'll give it 3 because it's solid.
Okay, 3. He also gave 3 to Goodfellas, so it tracks. No, I'm just kidding. If we all had the same thoughts about movies wouldn't be that interesting. Or TV shows.
Conversations wouldn't be that interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Because if we all just had a huge, I was gonna use an allegory, but it's kind of a '90s allegory. So, but if we all just had like a huge gush fest for Andor, it probably would have been boring. But I give Andor 4 out of 4.
Awesome.
We're never gonna see anything like it again for some time. It's just gonna be more Grogu and nostalgia bullshit from Disney. But for now, I'm happy to see what we have. I hope we use this as a shining example where $650 million on a show is well spent, and it's spent not just in the visual effects department or the set department, but in the script. But if you guys like what you saw, remember to go to ypareviews.com. That has all of our content. Unless you want to see some of the shorter reviews that I do, you can go to YPA Reviews on YouTube and YPA Review Chicago on TikTok. And until then, the YPA, by the way, stands for You'll Probably Agree. And if you don't agree, let me know respectfully why. Thank you guys so much for doing this. It was a blast talking about a show that will hold a very dear place in my heart for a long time. And yes, it is because I'm a Star Wars fan, and also because I never thought I'd see Star Wars do this ever. I thought it would just be Rebels versus Empire, Resistance versus First Order, garbage in, garbage out, same old member berry stuff for years, and I'm glad to see something different. So, Kathleen, take more chances with something like this. And until next time, we'll see you later. All right, bye.
Bye.
And maybe the Force be with you, or maybe there is no Force. I don't know.
Oh,
Goodbye.
there's Force.
Yeah, luckily there's no Jedi and crap like that in this show.